In Moscow this week, a familiar face was missing. When President Vladimir Putin convened his powerful Security Council to discuss the possibility of resuming full-scale nuclear testing, one chair was conspicuously empty. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister for more than 2 decades, wasn't there. His absence was all the more striking because every other senior member of Putin's inner circle was. And in the world of Kremlin politics, absences like that rarely go unnoticed. Almost immediately, speculation rippled through Russian and foreign media. Was the Kremlin preparing a reshuffle? Was Lavrov, the veteran diplomat who has long been the public face of Russian foreign policy, finally on his way out? The newspaper Kommersant cited informed sources, saying Lavrov was absent by agreement. But few bought the official line at face value. Adding intrigue, Putin had just signed a decree naming a younger aide, Maxim Oreshkin, a deputy chief of staff, to head Russia's delegation to the upcoming G20 summit in Johannesburg. That's a role Lavrov traditionally filled himself. One missing meeting could be coincidence. 2 snubs in a week? That looked like a signal. The timing was hardly ideal for Moscow's foreign ministry. Just weeks earlier, a long-planned summit between Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump in Budapest had collapsed. Lavrov had been point man for the talks, which fell apart after a tense call with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Washington accused Russia of refusing to soften its position on Ukraine and hit Moscow with fresh sanctions. But as the rumor mill churned, the Kremlin stepped in to calm the waters. On Friday, spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters there was no truth whatsoever to reports of a reshuffle. Lavrov, he said, continues to serve as foreign minister, of course. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova echoed that line, confirming his absence but adding, almost casually, that happens. For now, the old diplomat is still standing, a survivor of 2 decades of wars, sanctions, and diplomatic storms.
Of course, we were, surprised that President Trump once again stepped back to positions that seemed outdated, that only reflect President Zelensky's and Europe's hectic desire to win some time, to keep pumping weapons into Kiev regime, the armed forces of Ukraine and all other constituent parts of the Kiev regime. And President Trump, after Alaska and before Alaska, said many times that he needs a long-term sustainable peace, not just some temporary ceasefire that will result in nothing, even if it lasts for a year or more. That's his words. So we hope that the logic that the United States saw, the logic of establishing a long-lasting peace, that logic will prevail, we hope. There's no talk about extending the treaty. We're talking about the situation that when we withdrew out of the treaty as a gesture of goodwill, President Putin decided that until February, until it expires in February 2026, we will observe quantitative limits of the treaty, and since this treaty expires in February 2026, it's drawing closer, and there are no other options or ways of retaining any limitations under any other treaty. Our president proposed that we continue our observation of these limitations with the understanding that the United States does the same, so that we all win another year to look into today's status of affairs regarding strategic stability. And to make a new treaty requires a radically new situation in the Russian-American relationship. The situation is changing, of course, but first of all, we need to resume the dialogue, something that wasn't there at all during the Biden administration, but we have to give credit to the Trump administration. This dialogue is being resumed. And I think it's an unconditional obligation to leading nuclear powers, such as Russia and the United States. I hope we will be able to get a positive response from the United States, so that the United States also agrees to observe unilaterally the quantitative terms set forth in the START Treaty, and President Trump has talked positively several times about this initiative by President Putin. We're always satisfied and happy when illegal actions are reviewed and lifted and removed out of the way of natural, mutually beneficial cooperation. But if you read closer, lifting sanctions off Belarus is a disguised story. I think it's a very limited exclusion from the remaining regime of the sanctions regarding the range of the flight, and regarding spare parts. All this remains dependent on America. So I think it's more of a, I would say, it's more of an outside effect. We still welcome this because this is a step in the right direction, but still behind this there's still dependence of Belavia and its aircraft fleet on the US, and not only in terms of spare parts supplies, but in terms of trying to guide the policy, to rule the policy of this airline and the policy of Belarus. I hope that our American counterparts will realize that it's time to go back to doing business the honest way, the fair way.
Many in the West understand the importance of the Eurasian continent, but unfortunately, the Western countries and NATO countries primarily are not ready to engage in dialogue on the basis of mutual respect and mutual rights, equal rights, indivisibility of security on the entirety of our geopolitical space. Instead, NATO countries want NATO bodies to spread through the rest of the continent, including the Pacific region of the continent, and create closed, limited blocks, basically military unions there, thereby undermining the open architecture created for decades by the countries of ASEAN and other integration bodies. And now NATO countries are trying to thwart these positive processes promoted by ASEAN and others, and promote only their own interests, which have to do with containing the rise of China, Russia, and other players in the region, or any agent, any country in the region that wants to have its own independent policy that's based on national interests.